Let's go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the weekly demo for the distribution team. This week, I am looking specifically at GitLab org charts, GitLab issue number 2334. What I'm doing is demoing the actual, basically how this structure works and where the proof of concept came from. The idea is that we need to be able to split traffic between fleets, that's similar to how we do in production on VMs. So right now, the only real way to do that is to actually deploy the chart multiple times side by side, effectively either within the same namespace or across multiple namespaces. A couple of methods that were actually examined in issue number 2212. However, that adds some complexity because now you have to know what all of those deployment names are, change the service name value for all the cross-linking. It actually makes it harder to do what's necessary. So 2334 is basically doing something similar to what we're doing for Sidekick and making the web service into a generator pattern as opposed to just a static deployment. Now, I'm manually doing this. There are no actual matching changes or an MR to this, but I'm just demoing how it would actually function. Screen good? Okay. So I've already deployed the latest released version of GitLab, so 4.401. And I am running actively on GKE version 1.16. They recently did an update and force upgraded all of our nodes. So here we are. The good news is nothing broke. So we knew what we were doing ahead of time for once. So what I've done here is I've deployed it. I've gone ahead and logged in, added an SSH key, but also created a personal access token. And then I've made the changes necessary to get, or ideally the changes necessary to get the traffic routed into the right locations. So one of the nice handy parts of Helm is you can actually say Helm get, but one of the things you can say there is get manifest, and it will actually return all of the Kubernetes objects as it understands them. So per issue 2334, effectively what we want to do is we want to have one ingress and then a set of items for the rest of the deployment. So we need a deployment, we need a service, we need a PDB that matches to the label selectors because otherwise you've got PDBs touching things they shouldn't. We want the same thing for an HPA. We want it pointed at the deployment by name. So we have a couple of resources we need to effectively duplicate from web service. In this example, what I'm doing is creating, flip over here, a base, which will be effectively web or default, API, and get. So what I've done is I've pulled the full manifest down. Obviously, I don't need every single thing that's in here, but for the giggles of line count, almost 5,000 lines. And I don't even have everything turned on. What I've done is I've gone through and pulled out all the web service bits that were generated from that chart and placed them into 2 copies of that and then made the necessary changes. That being the name of the objects. So it's GitLab Web Service-API and GitLab Web Service-Git. And then I've added one more label, which is gitlab.com/webservice, to tell us which group it's actually coming from. This is a malleable item, but I just did this for consistency and visibility. And then over in the ingress, this needs some small changes made to it. I've added additional paths, one for anything under API and one for anything under the regex that we have in place from recent changes to this regex within the omnibus. Basically, the easiest way for me to get most of it right was to take what we already had and hope it works out of the box. So that's the attempt there. all I've done in that regard is then turned around and actually just troop control apply, and I applied each of the deployments. The objects are still in the same order, so it's doing things in such a direction that you're not going to like have a rejection from the API because the objects don't exist. And once I've got those down, then I turned around and updated the ingress with this additional change set. So at this point, if I go into our Nginx, we have one here for web service get, one for web service, and there's web service API, and of course all the rest for everything else. So Nginx knows that it's supposed to be pointing all these things in the right direction. This is the location path, which looks correct. As you can see, the interpolation of our literal $ actually changed out a little bit. So that's a fun one to see, but it works the same way. Go ahead and pop out of that one. But I will go ahead and jump into the logs there. So just to see if I can't turn off a little bit of detail here. No, not a whole lot. So I will do full screen and make that a little easier for us to follow along. Come back to the demo here and just so everybody can see we are indeed active. Here we are. Now you see the interesting part here is you'll see there's the admin request and then there's the API, right? So in theory, I should have a record on one of the web pods for /admin and the API pods for this call to application statistics, right? So I'm just gonna go ahead and pop out of that one. We're gonna hope I get the right pod. Get that workhorse. Which one I ended up at. Let me just go refresh the page and hope I got the right one. Yeah, we're going to do star. I don't think I can even do that, really. There we go. Hopefully, this is not so noisy that we can't manage to actually see the traffic. I'll move this just over here and hit refresh. /admin says it went to a web service get. Okay, that'll be a fun one to little debug into. Let's see, where did the API request go? There we go. API managed to go actually to the API. So maybe it just doesn't quite work right with the regex. Let's now go have ourselves a look. What I have in this directory, is HTTP and SSH. Basically, it's the same checkout. So I'll go into SSH, get remote HTTP. See, I'm running the SSH connection here. So get status. Yep, no HTTPS traffic there. Good. Okay, so now we do have some GET traffic. So here we are. For some reason, this ended up at API. That seems interesting. So now we've seen that we got GET traffic ending up at API for some reason, and we had traffic that should have gone to web or nothing that ended up in GET for some reason. Now, the question is why? So let's go double check this configuration. And yes, I know I just catted to more. I could have skipped that. I could have just moored it and been happy. So let's see what actually comes out from this. Okay. That's the back end. Here we are, GitLab separate container party. Actually, you know what? Let me see if I can't make this easier on us. If anybody has issue reading this, please let me know. I'll try to make it larger. Here we are. So this is GitLab separate containers party, which there should be one of. Down to our location. So there's location admin sidekick, which says that this should go to GitLab web service. Location API, which shows that that should go there based on the location path of /API. And it definitely says that it should be using that. And then / and everything else should be going through web service. Did we miss the Git one? Go all the way up here. Okay, no, I just skipped past it. Now, let's do a quick comparison here. View file add. Whoops. And I need 695. So I think actually we may have a hitch because of this literal dollar maybe. Because Git's not tracking in the right location. So we may have to play with this definition to get this to work the way we want it to. Interesting, because this location line looks right, but this location path looks a little funky. So that might be what's going on there. I guess the question, though, at the same time is we did see that we had some traffic that should have gone to different ones ending up at the wrong place. The question, I guess, at that point is why? No, need to come back up here. Okay. I'm going to find these proxy upstream declarations. Really, there's one of those. So do you think this is a configuration issue on my end, or is this maybe something that we don't understand in how Nginx actually behaves?
One thing to verify might be just the service level that we haven't accidentally matched. Like that maybe Nginx isn't going to the right service, but maybe the services are matching all.
All right, let's go see what K9 says. So let's go look at web service and see which ones are here. Yep. So definitely web service is a little flaky. API is correct. Git is correct. But this one is definitely not right. So let's make a small alteration to this. This service needs, because we are going based strictly on label selectors. And of course, there's no negation for label selectors as far as I know. I'm looking because, sometimes things change. Yep. Label selectors for both objects being service and replication controller are equality-based only. So we have to separate the default by adding that configuration in. So we'll pop back over to here. Let's go ahead and just take deployment API, AC, and paste this puppy in. Ah, classic. Drink. And one recreated setup. No, I'll stay there. Okay, now we're seeing just that, and just that, and just that. Better behavior. Of course, let's wait for those to come up before I try and direct traffic to nowhere.
What's that new PF column with the circle? Haven't seen that, the second one?
I don't actually know. I've not nudged with that yet. You know what, for giggles, while that's trying to load, let's see what happens. Traffic went somewhere. I am actually going to just go ahead and restart the Nginx container just to make sure it reloads.
I think it might be port forwarding PF.
Might be. Okay, everything ran. Let me turn wrap on. See, that makes it easier to see where it went. Okay, actually it does. Let's do that. So the assets went to default. API went to web service API. Admin went to web service. So it looks like this is better behaved already. Let's go ahead and do pull just to be sure. That went to web service. So that was definitely over HTTPS. And that definitely went through web service. So there's something we have to figure out about GET, but we can definitely see the API calls are routing in the right direction. So I'm going to see what happens if I intentionally route a request through curl that hits API. So that definitely went into the right place. And I got a 401 denied, which is somewhat expected. So let's just go ahead and do this. So the call to API went to API, and then the call to user sign-in went to web service. So we can definitively, reliably, big air quotes, get API and default, aka web, to actually separate without any problems whatsoever. It looks like we do have an issue when it comes to the ingress itself, though. Something in the definition of this role is not appreciated. And that we have to figure out why. So I recently brought this documentation up, so let me go grab that. Case and set of regular expressions for paths path field, which is what we're doing. I have to add an annotation. I apparently also need an alias to the misspelled command. Okay, there's full reload here. So let us try this again. And this time we ended up, the get went to default, and the, let me try. It reloaded the config. Let's go see what the, oh, right, because the pod was renamed because I restarted it. Brilliant. Let's see what the config looks like. Already in the right location. Yeah. So starting with API should go to the API. That one goes to the right place. This is get. Get has this literal $sign. I have a feeling that's biting us. This looks correct. I think. Too many windows. Here we are. RT syntax. So I say this looks correct, but I guess I've never seen this behavior. Or am I using the wrong thing? DJ, you recently touched this in Omnibus MR 4516. I'm going to drop that into the chat. If I can find the chat. There we are. There's the link.
Yeah, so this regex isn't just for Git traffic. I think it's just for and like in Omnibus, it's just for traffic we want to turn off request buffering for, I think. But that does like that's why the job artifacts are on there as well. But it does include, like in the middle there, the receive pack for Git.
Okay.
So I would have expected that to still be matched.
Is this double slash a problem?
Possibly.
I'll bet you that's what I've got going on, because that's actually looking for the double slashes. I'll bet that's what I have broken. Because then that's actually interpolating, reading RE2, too much time in Perl. Backslash, backslash, dot, literally says my path should be backslash anything, versus my path should be dot thing going forward. So I wonder if that's a gaffe. I guess the question is, what does this actually look like on a functional omnibus? Yeah, that looks a lot different. So I guess the big question is this accurate for everything we need? Don't know, but it's a lot more accurate than what I had. So we'll set that.
Yeah, I think unfortunately that one might be, like, one of the reasons we changed from that one is that it's invalid regex as well.
You're correct. Fix, remove useless query string match and disable buffering for artifacts. So we went from what I now have here, which gets rejected by Nginx. Too many windows. Oh, that's where I put it. To what we have here. Is this, I guess the question is, what does the request look like? Why does the regex need to be an absolute path? So on the upside, we do have the rest of the traffic going to the right place at this point. Mitch, you were saying?
Does it just have to start with a slash on line 37? I don't know if that would fix it, but is it supposed to start with a /?
It might be one of those scenarios where we need to preemptively add that. Yeah. Literally, the RFC says must begin with a slash. Look at that.
That's handy.
So yeah, so I need a match with the slash dot in it to get that to function correctly. So this is a matter of let's play with regex. That is always fun. So I need this, but I need dot star. Let's see if it takes that. It took that. So let's see what the configuration looks like now. Okay, that looks more accurate. I didn't just do a post. Backset. I guess I did do a post. And it still went to web service.
Yeah, I think the regex we have now is actually just for push.
Okay. Well, that we need to fix. Info refs. Refs get receive. Yeah, you're right. So let me do a push. Because I also don't see upload pack there. So we may need the additional work.
Yeah, in the end, we're going to need a completely different regex for this. Just because what we're trying to do here isn't exactly the same as what the omnibus is trying to do. The omnibus's regex is just identifying paths to turn proxy buffering off for, and not specifically trying to call out Git traffic.
Yeah, that's fair. Apparently I need to go unprotect master. When in doubt, just reset the local copy. Probably faster. Okay. Hey, we got traffic to Git on a push for receive pack. So the info refs went through web service, and the actual post of .get receive pack went through get. Okay, so let's take a little bit of feedback that we have right here and say that our ingress needs to be adjusted. Receive pack went through get, which matches. Refs get receive pack. Get upload pack went through web service, web service. Info refs receive pack. That in theory should have worked and gone through get.
I'm trying to remember what the problem was with the original regex. I think it might be that you can't use the parameters here. Like, so the service equals get receive back. I don't think that's valid in this at this point.
But could we just take like all of, oh, actually you're right.
Yeah, which is fine for this case though, actually. You can actually draw, like, because we're just trying to grab all Git traffic, so you could just do the info refs and drop the parameter. But yeah, I think that was the problem with the old regex that we've changed recently, is I just don't think that having service in there works for the location line.
Okay, well that's reloaded. Yeah, it does not like that. Okay. So we will just yank that out. You know what's really tempting? There we go. Just pull all of info in. Packet controller reloaded. Get. There we go. So obviously, we're going to have some fun with the folks that handle what the actual URL patterns are for the Git fleet traffic, or the Git HTTPS fleet traffic. So there's a little bit of fun to be had there, and I'll take this and throw this in the demo notes and actually also throw it into the issue as well.
Yeah, I think the on GitLab.com, there's will already have been a regex established, but it'll have been for HA proxy.
Right.
So we'll just have to take, but we'll be able to use that as a basis basically for this.
Mm-hmm. So after some fiddling, we can see that all the traffic is going apparently to the right places. So let's go ahead and pop back to here. I'm gonna go ahead and just shrink this window a bit. Refresh the page. APIs are going to API, API, assets went to default, root demo blah went to default, and message logs from the tree went to default. So that's good. So let's just go ahead and click default, default, default. Good. Those appear to be behaving. I was saying if it actually tried to do anything elsewhere, but it appears that all the UI traffic is indeed going to the right place, and that all the API traffic is going as expected. Is GraphQL going to the API service. So it appears to work as we would expect at this point. Now that we've taken 50 minutes, does anybody have questions, comments, concerns regarding the issue as they might have reviewed it?
Just curious, this would be an optional pattern. We would by default still just deploy one service and one pod for web server, or not one pod, but one deployment for web service.
Yes, this is a scalability item. This should be clarified in the issue. But the idea is if you do not specify anything, it will deploy default. If you do specify deployment breakdowns, it will deploy the ones that you told it to deploy.
So it should be a lot like Sidekick.
It should be a lot like Sidekick, but not quite. One of the things that we want to point out is that we don't want it quite as complete as Sidekick. We want to make sure it has all the necessary configuration properties and that those are observed. But we need to make sure that this path is simpler than redefining a default queue set in Sidekick. Most people never need to touch Sidekick, or they really need to touch Sidekick. With web service, we don't want to have to be warning people that all the settings have moved. With Sidekick, you set global defaults, and then the default queue set inherits those. With web service, you should only really have to touch them if you absolutely have to. So I don't necessarily want to require the deployments object to be populated. Basically go, if there are no deployments, just make the default. Though at the same time, we could just make default, like just assume default's there and just always make default. That's an option too, but it's going to come down to implementation details, and right now that's going to be not my choice.
Makes sense.
It's a good point though. And the urgency, by the way, for this is that we want to get this for .com like soon. So this is also, hi delivery. Look, I'm not talking about nothing. It actually works. So we're going to have a little bit of input from infrastructure and delivery and understanding what the regex should be and how to put traffic in the right place. One thing DJ will have to pay attention to is the need to actually disable request buffering and how to do that. Because we may actually have to make a separate ingress instead of just setting up different paths in the ingress itself. Just because we may need different annotations.
Yeah, I'm also not sure what delivery's intent is with the ingresses yet. Like, as if they're planning to roll their own or not.
No. They want to use ours. So there will be a load balancer in front. So the GK would come in, hit, I think HA proxy, and then HA proxy would divvy traffic out, canary and prod. And then that would actually hit the ingress for our chart and then divvy the traffic as appropriate. So that might be the thing we have to deal with, is how do we need different annotations and how to populate those. Now, the good news is you can actually just have more than one ingress. This demo was an attempt to not populate everything if we don't have to. Right? So like the config maps are the same. The ingress is shared because we're basically just changing paths. But if we have to actually set, hey, don't proxy buffer, a half a terabyte of Git data, because that could happen under enough load, then we may need to set those things, but we may have to come across that in the future.
Yeah, I'm guessing we'll find out fairly shortly, as in like within a couple hours of them using it in production.
Well, I strongly hope they put it in staging first. Okay, well, if we have no other items to discuss, then I will say that was a pretty good demo. Had to iron out a few interesting little hitches, and let's call it a week.